You don't remember being hurt, not in the dramatic way people expect. There were no slammed doors, no shouting matches, no obvious villains. There was food on the table. There was a roof overhead. There was function. But something essential was missing. You learned early that your emotions didn't cause alarm. They didn't interrupt the room. They didn't matter enough to be addressed. So you adapted. Quietly, intelligently, invisibly. You stopped asking for things. You stopped expecting comfort. You learned to be easy. This is the psychology of a child who felt quietly neglected. Not abused, not abandoned, just unseen. And here's the dark truth. What you learned to survive that environment didn't disappear when you grew up. It became your personality, your coping style, your sense of self. You became observant, low maintenance, mature for your age. You learned how to read rooms, anticipate moods, and stay out of the way. Adults praised you for it. They didn't realize they were praising a wound. Because neglect doesn't scream, it whispers. And when it's quiet enough, it gets mistaken for strength. But inside you, something learned a dangerous equation. Connection requires self-erasure. Love is earned by not needing. Safety exists only when you are small. What once protected you now slowly harms you. And most of the time, you don't even realize it's happening. Quiet emotional neglect is not about what happened to you. It's about what didn't. It is the chronic absence of attunement. When caregivers fail to notice, name, or respond to a child's emotional world. The child isn't attacked. They're ignored. Psychologically, this creates a unique developmental distortion. One key mechanism is emotional neglect, which teaches the nervous system that expressing needs leads to nothing. Over time, the brain adapts by dampening emotional signals. You don't stop having feelings, you stop trusting them. Then comes hypervigilance. When no one is reliably tracking your inner state, you start tracking everyone else's. You learn to monitor tone shifts, facial expressions, micromoods. Your safety depends on prediction. Your nervous system stays alert, not for danger, but for absence. Another common outcome is avoidant attachment. You learned that closeness doesn't soothe, it disappoints. So you grow self-sufficient, independent, hard to read. You rely on yourself because relying on others once felt pointless. Neuroscientifically, this reshapes the default mode network, the brain system responsible for self-concept and internal narrative. Instead of forming a stable sense of, I am worthy of care, the internal story becomes, I exist best when I'm unobtrusive. You don't feel entitled to support. You feel responsible for managing yourself. This is not a personality trait. It's a nervous system adaptation. And adaptations, while brilliant in childhood, can become prisons in adulthood. The deepest cost of quiet neglect is not anxiety or sadness. It's the loss of authenticity. You learned to edit yourself before you were even fully formed. You became who was easiest to love, not who you were. You don't ask, what do I feel? You ask, what is allowed here? This creates what Carl Jung described as a split psyche, a socially acceptable self and a buried, unheard inner child. The rejected parts don't disappear. They wait. They surface as emptiness, as chronic loneliness, as the sense that life is happening near you, but not through you. Seneca wrote that the greatest burden is living without knowing what you truly want. That confusion isn't laziness. It's the residue of having your desires ignored for too long. Rilke warned that unlived lives turn into quiet sorrow. Your grief is invisible because it's not about something you lost. It's about something you never received. You fear being a burden. You fear being too much. You fear rest, because rest once meant emotional abandonment. So you stay productive, helpful, contained, and slowly, invisibly, exhausted. These children don't disappear when they grow up. They become adults who you might struggle with relationships, choosing partners who are emotionally distant, unavailable, or inconsistent, because intensity feels unsafe and neglect feels familiar. You might overfunction in careers, becoming indispensable, reliable, quietly resentful, confusing self-worth with usefulness. You might have weak boundaries, saying yes when you mean no, then blaming yourself for the burnout that follows. You might experience emotional dysregulation, not explosive, but internalized, numbness, shutdown, delayed grief. You might struggle with identity, unsure what you want, who you are, or what actually brings you joy. You might sabotage intimacy through self-silencing, withdrawing when closeness appears, or minimizing your needs before anyone else can. None of these are flaws. They are coping mechanisms that once kept you emotionally safe. But adulthood requires something different. Unlearning doesn't mean becoming louder or more demanding overnight. It means relearning permission. Permission to take up space. Permission to have needs before they become emergencies. Permission to disappoint others without disappearing. Awareness is the first rupture in the pattern. When you can say, this reaction protected me once, you loosen its grip. You don't need to erase the strategy, you need to update it. Healing from quiet neglect is not dramatic. It's gentle, slow, relational. It begins with inner child work, learning to listen to the part of you that learned silence. Not to fix it, but to witness it. It deepens through shadow work, reclaiming the needs, anger, and longing you were taught to suppress. It stabilizes through nervous system regulation, teaching your body that presence does not equal danger and rest does not equal abandonment. And most importantly, it requires a shift from survival to softness. Softness is not weakness. It is the courage to be seen without guarantees. One truth anchors this entire journey. You were never too much. You were simply unmet. You don't heal by becoming someone else. You heal by allowing yourself to exist fully. The goal is not to be fixed, but to become whole. If this resonated, share it with someone who learned to survive quietly. And if you want to continue this work together, stay here, subscribe. Because some truths were never spoken to you, and it's time they were.